I'm Brianna Green, 42 years old, and 3 months ago, something happened at my corporate job that changed everything. I discovered my manager had been systematically blocking my promotions for 2 years. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because of the color of my skin. The betrayal cut deep, but what the company did when I reported it was even worse. If you've ever experienced racism in the workplace, please let me know where you're watching from and subscribe to join others who understand this struggle. Let me take you back to how I built my career despite every obstacle thrown my way. Growing up in Detroit, my grandmother Eunice used to sit me down at her kitchen table every Sunday after church, pressing a warm sweet potato pie into my hands while she talked about the importance of education. "Baby girl," she'd say, stirring her famous collard greens. "They can take a lot from us, but they can't take what's in your head." My mama, a nurse who worked double shifts to keep us afloat, would nod and add, "But you gotta be twice as good to get half as much. That's just the truth of it." Those Sunday dinners weren't just about family time. They were strategy sessions preparing me for a world that wouldn't always welcome me with open arms. I carried that wisdom with me through my marketing degree at Howard University, where I thrived in an environment that celebrated Black excellence. My professors, Dr. Sarah Johnson and Dr. Simon Thompson, pushed me to think bigger, to see marketing not just as selling products but as storytelling that could change perceptions. I graduated summa cum laude, but I knew the real test would come when I entered corporate America. My first job at a small agency in Chicago was humbling. I was often the only Black person in client meetings, watching how my white colleagues could speak up confidently while I calculated every word, knowing one mistake could confirm their worst assumptions about my capabilities. But I learned to navigate those spaces with grace and strategy. I studied my colleagues' communication styles, mastered the art of code switching between my professional voice and my authentic self. During lunch breaks, I'd call my sorority sisters from Howard, Angela, Denise, and Tiffany, who were fighting similar battles in law firms and consulting companies across the country. We'd share strategies, celebrate each other's wins, and remind each other that we belonged in those boardrooms. "You carry all of us with you," Angela would tell me during our Friday night calls. "When you succeed, we all succeed." Over 5 years, I built my reputation one campaign at a time. I landed the Henderson Electronics account that brought in $2.3 million in revenue, developed the Voices of Tomorrow campaign that won 3 industry awards, and mentored 4 junior associates who all went on to successful careers. My annual reviews were stellar: exceptional strategic thinking, innovative approach to client relations, natural leadership abilities. I bought my first house in Oak Park, a beautiful 2-story with a garden where I could grow the tomatoes and herbs my grandmother taught me to tend. I was finally living the dream my family had sacrificed for. I joined Meridian Marketing Solutions 3 years ago as a senior marketing manager, drawn by their claims of being a diversity-forward company. The office walls were covered with photos of their diverse workforce, and their website proudly displayed their inclusion awards. During my interview with David Harrison, the creative director, I felt optimistic. "We need fresh perspectives," he said, gesturing to the awards on his wall. "Your portfolio shows exactly the kind of innovative thinking we're looking for." I started at $78,000, less than I'd asked for, but they promised rapid advancement for top performers. The first year felt like a honeymoon period. I exceeded every target, bringing in new clients and revitalizing struggling accounts. My presentations were polished, my strategies effective, and my relationships with clients strong. I organized the company's first Juneteenth celebration, working with our small group of Black employees, Simon from IT, Vanessa from accounting, and Jerome from operations, to create an event that educated our colleagues while celebrating our culture. We served soul food from my favorite caterer on the South Side, played music from Black artists who'd shaped American culture, and I gave a presentation about the history and significance of the holiday. The response was positive, with several white colleagues thanking me for opening their eyes. By my second year, I was ready for advancement. The Senior Director of Strategic Accounts position opened up, a role I was perfectly qualified for. I had more industry experience than any other candidate, better client relationships, and a track record of exceeding revenue targets by an average of 23%. When I scheduled a meeting with my direct supervisor, Jennifer Walsh, to express my interest, she seemed supportive. "You're definitely on our radar," she said, though something in her tone felt hollow. "These decisions take time, but keep doing what you're doing." But then something strange started happening. Despite my performance, despite my qualifications, despite the glowing feedback from clients, I kept getting passed over. First, they hired Michael Johnson from outside the company. "You're a smart guy, but with 2 years less experience and no proven track record with our client base. We wanted someone with fresh perspectives," Jennifer explained when I asked for feedback. 6 months later, the regional account director position opened up. Again, I applied. Again, I was told I was being considered. Again, they hired someone else, this time Sarah Weinstein, who had actually worked under me at my previous company and had needed my mentorship to succeed. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Each rejection came with vague feedback: "We're looking for someone with more leadership presence," or "We need someone who can think more strategically." The same coded language that had been used to sideline qualified Black professionals for decades. Meanwhile, I watched as my white colleagues with similar or lesser qualifications moved up the ladder. Jessica Martinez, who started a year after me, got promoted to Senior Director of Digital Strategy. Tom Bradley, whose biggest client success had come from implementing my recommendation, became Director of Client Relations. Something was happening here, something deliberate and systematic, but I needed proof before I could act. I started paying closer attention to meetings, to conversations, to the way decisions were really made in this company. And slowly the picture became clear. I wasn't being passed over despite my qualifications, I was being passed over because of something much more insidious. The first crack in the facade came during what I now call the gaslighting incident. I had requested a meeting with Jennifer to discuss my career trajectory, armed with documentation of my performance metrics, client testimonials, and industry recognition. Her office felt different that day, colder somehow, with the morning light casting harsh shadows across her desk. She had arranged for HR representative Linda Morrison to join us, which immediately put me on alert. "Brianna, we appreciate your enthusiasm for advancement," Jennifer began, her voice taking on that particular tone white women use when they're about to deliver devastating news while maintaining plausible deniability. "But we've been discussing your performance, and there are some areas where we feel you could improve." I kept my voice steady, professional. "I'd love to hear your feedback. My metrics show I've exceeded targets for 18 consecutive months, and client satisfaction scores put me in the top 5% company-wide." Linda Morrison leaned forward, her smile tight. "Numbers don't tell the whole story, Brianna. We're looking at leadership qualities, cultural fit, the ability to represent our brand values." The phrase cultural fit hit me like a slap. I'd heard it before, knew it was often code for someone who looks and sounds like us. But I pressed forward. "Can you give me specific examples of areas where my leadership or cultural fit has been lacking?" Jennifer exchanged a glance with Linda. "Well, for instance, that Juneteenth event you organized. While we appreciate the cultural exchange, some clients felt it was a bit too political for a corporate environment. Educating people about a federal holiday celebrating the end of slavery is political." I asked, fighting to keep the edge out of my voice. "It's just that our clients come from diverse backgrounds with different comfort levels around these topics," Linda explained. "We need leaders who can navigate these sensitivities." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with them systematically undermining every achievement I'd worked for. My client relationships were adequate but not exceptional. My strategic thinking was good but not visionary. My leadership style was perhaps too assertive for our collaborative culture. Each criticism was delivered with corporate speak precision, designed to sound legitimate while being impossible to definitively prove as discriminatory. "I think what we're saying," Jennifer concluded, "is that you might want to focus on being more team-oriented. Sometimes the best way to lead is to follow." I left that meeting feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. That evening, I called my sister Denise, who worked as a civil rights attorney in Atlanta. "They're using the playbook," she said after I recounted the conversation. "Performance isn't the issue, blackness is. They can't say that directly, so they attack your personality, your leadership style, your fit. Start documenting everything, sis. Dates, times, witnesses, exact quotes if you can remember them." That weekend, I sat in my kitchen with a legal pad reconstructing every interaction I could remember. The pattern was clear. Every time I'd advocated for myself or my ideas too strongly, I'd been labeled aggressive. Every time I'd brought up diversity issues, I'd been told I was being divisive. Every time I'd celebrated Black excellence or culture, I'd been warned about being too political. I started keeping detailed notes of every meeting, every conversation, every email. I began requesting written feedback for everything, creating a paper trail that would be harder to deny. And I reached out to Simon, Vanessa, and Jerome to see if they'd experienced similar treatment. What I learned made my blood boil. Simon had been repeatedly passed over for the IT director position despite having the most technical expertise on the team. They keep hiring white guys fresh out of college and putting them in management roles over me, he told me during a quiet conversation in the break room. Last week, David Harrison told me I should be grateful just to have a good job in this economy. Vanessa had similar stories from the accounting department. They love my work when it's behind the scenes, she said, but the moment I speak up in meetings or suggest process improvements, suddenly I'm being too aggressive or not collaborative enough. Jerome had been working in operations for 5 years with perfect performance reviews but had never been considered for promotion to supervisor despite training every new hire who eventually got promoted above him. We were all experiencing the same thing, being valued for our work, but kept from advancing because our presence in leadership roles made our white colleagues uncomfortable. The four of us started meeting regularly, sharing information and supporting each other as we navigated the increasingly hostile environment. The retaliation for that first meeting with Jennifer came swift and subtle. Suddenly, I wasn't being invited to key strategy sessions. My input on client presentations was frequently overlooked or credited to other team members. The Henderson Electronics account, my biggest success, was reassigned to Tom Bradley to ensure continuity while you focus on your development areas. When I raised concerns about being excluded from important meetings, Jennifer's response was textbook gaslighting. I think you're being a bit sensitive, Brianna. We're just trying to help you focus on the areas where you can grow. Sometimes taking on too much responsibility too quickly can be overwhelming. But the most devastating blow came when they restructured my role without consultation. I arrived at work one Monday to find an email informing me that my position was being refined to focus on relationship management and cultural initiatives. Translation: they were stripping away my strategic responsibilities and pigeonholing me into the role of diversity coordinator, a position that would keep me busy with feel-good events while removing me from any real power or influence. We think this aligns better with your strengths and interests, Jennifer explained when I requested clarification. After all, you did such a wonderful job with the Juneteenth celebration. The condescension was breathtaking. They were literally relegating me to organizing cultural events, using my blackness as both the reason to exclude me from leadership and the justification for giving me unpaid diversity work on top of my regular responsibilities. That night, I called my grandmother, now 84 and still sharp as a tack. "Baby girl," she said after I explained what was happening, "they're trying to put you back in your place. But you ain't the same little girl who used to sit at my kitchen table. You got tools now, you got knowledge, and you got folks who believe in you. Don't let them steal your dreams because they can't handle your light." Her words gave me strength, but I knew I needed more than encouragement. I scheduled a consultation with employment attorney Robert Johnson, who specialized in workplace discrimination cases. After reviewing my documentation, he was direct: "You have a clear pattern of disparate treatment based on race. The question is whether you want to file an EEOC complaint or explore other options first." I decided to give the company one more chance to do the right thing. I requested a meeting with Jennifer's supervisor, Regional Director Patricia Thompson, hoping that someone higher up the chain might be more reasonable. The meeting took place in the building's executive conference room, all glass walls and polished mahogany. Patricia Thompson sat across from me with Jennifer and Linda Morrison flanking her like bodyguards. I had prepared meticulously, bringing documentation of my performance, examples of successful projects, and a clear comparison of my qualifications versus those who had been promoted over me. "I appreciate you coming to me with your concerns," Patricia began, her tone suggesting she appreciated nothing of the sort. "But I have to say, after reviewing your file with Jennifer and Linda, we have some concerns about your attitude and approach to feedback. My heart sank. They weren't here to listen, they were here to build their case against me. The feedback I received was vague and contradicted by my performance metrics. I replied carefully. I'm asking for specific, actionable guidance on how to advance in this company. Jennifer leaned forward. Brianna, I think part of the issue is that you seem to view every piece of feedback through a racial lens. Not everything is about discrimination. Sometimes people don't get promoted because they're not ready, regardless of their background. The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. They were doing what racists always do when confronted with their behavior, turning the conversation back on the victim, making my awareness of racism the problem rather than addressing the racism itself. I'm viewing my career stagnation through the lens of documented patterns, I said, pulling out my folder. I've been passed over for 6 positions in 2 years despite exceeding performance metrics. Every person promoted over me has been white, and several had fewer qualifications and less experience. Patricia Thompson's expression hardened. Are you suggesting we make hiring decisions based on race? Because that would be highly inappropriate and potentially illegal. The irony was staggering. She was accusing me of suggesting the very thing they were already doing, just in the opposite direction. I'm suggesting you examine why qualified Black employees aren't advancing in this company. I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. I'm suggesting you look at the feedback you give Black employees versus white employees and ask yourself if the standards are truly the same. Linda Morrison jumped in with her HR training. Brianna, we want to support your growth, but you need to be open to feedback and willing to work on the areas we've identified. Your defensiveness about performance conversations is concerning. Defensiveness, another loaded word used to pathologize Black women's reasonable responses to unfair treatment. If I accepted their criticism quietly, I was passive and lacking leadership qualities. If I advocated for myself, I was defensive and difficult to work with. The meeting ended with Patricia Thompson making their position crystal clear. We believe we've been more than fair in our evaluation and feedback processes. If you're not satisfied with your career progression here, perhaps you should consider whether Meridian is the right fit for your goals. The message was unmistakable. Accept the status quo or leave. That evening, I sat in my car in the company parking lot, tears of rage and frustration streaming down my face. They weren't just blocking my advancement, they were trying to gaslight me into believing I was the problem. But my grandmother's voice echoed in my head, don't let them steal your dreams because they can't handle your light. I drove straight to Attorney Robert Johnson's office and filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The die was cast. The company's response to my EEOC filing was swift and predictable. Within a week, I was called into another meeting, this time with Patricia Thompson and the company's outside legal counsel, a stern-faced white man named Richard Kraft, who looked like he'd stepped out of a 1950s boardroom. Miss Green, he began, his voice dripping with condescension, we're disappointed that you felt the need to involve outside agencies in what we consider an internal personnel matter. We've always prided ourselves on being able to resolve workplace issues collaboratively. The gaslighting was reaching new heights. They were framing my pursuit of civil rights as a betrayal of company loyalty. Your filing makes some very serious allegations, Patricia added. Allegations that frankly we find both unfounded and damaging to the reputation of this company and the individuals involved. Richard Kraft opened a thick folder. We've conducted our own investigation into your claims, and what we've found is a pattern of performance issues and resistance to feedback that preceded any promotion decisions. We have documentation showing that your supervisors have repeatedly tried to help you improve in key areas. I knew what was coming. They had spent the weeks since our last meeting manufacturing a counter-narrative, creating documentation that would support their version of events. Every vague criticism they'd given me was now being reframed as specific performance deficiencies. Every time I'd advocated for myself was being characterized as insubordination. For instance, Patricia continued, pulling out a memo that definitely hadn't existed before my EEOC filing. Jennifer documented several instances where you failed to accept feedback constructively and became argumentative during performance discussions. Jennifer never mentioned being argumentative in any of our meetings, I said. In fact, she specifically praised my professionalism during our last review. Richard Kraft smiled coldly. People's perceptions can differ, Miss Green. What matters is how your behavior was perceived by your supervisors. They had turned my EEOC complaint into a weapon against me, using it as evidence that I was a problem employee who blamed others for my own shortcomings. It was a masterclass in corporate manipulation, designed to make me question my own experiences and memories. But I had been documenting everything, and I had allies they didn't know about. I understand you've been having conversations with other employees about these issues, Patricia said, her tone taking on a threatening edge. I want to be clear that discussing confidential personnel matters with coworkers could be grounds for disciplinary action. She was warning me to stop talking to Simon, Vanessa, and Jerome, trying to isolate me from the support system that was keeping me sane and helping me see the bigger picture. I have the right to discuss working conditions with my colleagues, I replied, drawing on the labor law knowledge I'd been frantically researching, and I have the right to pursue legal remedies for workplace discrimination. Richard Kraft leaned back in his chair. Of course you have legal rights, Miss Green, but you also have professional obligations. We hope you'll consider whether pursuing this course of action is really in your best interests. The threat was clear: back down or face escalating retaliation. That weekend, I met with my attorney Robert Johnson to develop our strategy. They're following the standard playbook, he explained. Manufacture performance issues, isolate the complainant, and make the process as miserable as possible to force a withdrawal. But we have something they don't expect. He pulled out a stack of documents I'd never seen before. I've been working with a private investigator, and we've uncovered some very interesting patterns in Meridian's promotion data over the past 5 years. The statistics were damning. In a company that was 23% Black and Latino, only 4% of leadership positions were held by people of color. The average time to promotion for white employees was 8 years. For Black employees, it was 3 years. And in cases where Black employees were promoted, they were typically moved into diversity and inclusion roles rather than core business leadership positions. We also found something else, Robert continued, handing me a printed email chain. Remember that private investigator I mentioned? He has sources inside the company. I read the emails with growing amazement and fury. They were internal communications between Patricia Thompson, Jennifer Walsh, and David Harrison discussing how to handle the diversity problem in their department. We need to be careful about promoting too many minorities too quickly, David Harrison had written. It changes the culture and makes some of our key clients uncomfortable. Jennifer's response was even more explicit. Brianna is talented, but she's very assertive about racial issues. Promoting her would send the wrong message about what we value. Patricia Thompson's reply sealed their fate. Let's focus on finding legitimate performance reasons to justify our decisions. We can't be seen as discriminatory, but we also can't let the tail wag the dog. They had literally put their racist decision-making process in writing. This is what we call a smoking gun, Robert said with satisfaction. They've documented their own discriminatory intent. Now we have them armed with this evidence. We prepared for the final confrontation. The EEOC had scheduled a formal hearing, and Meridian would have to defend their practices in front of a federal investigator. But before that hearing, Robert suggested we try one more approach. Sometimes showing them what we have is enough to force a settlement, he explained. It saves everyone time and money, and it gives you more control over the outcome. We requested a mediation session, ostensibly to explore resolution options. In reality, it was our chance to show them exactly how much trouble they were in. The mediation took place in a downtown conference room, neutral territory for what was about to become a very one-sided negotiation. Patricia Thompson, Jennifer Walsh, David Harrison, and Richard Kraft sat on one side of the table, looking confident and prepared to dismiss another frivolous discrimination claim. Robert Johnson and I sat across from them with a stack of evidence that would destroy their careers and cost their company millions. Before we begin, Robert said pleasantly, I want to share some information we've gathered during our investigation. He placed the first document on the table, Meridian's promotion statistics broken down by race. Patricia Thompson's face went pale as she recognized the damning numbers. As you can see, Robert continued, there's a clear pattern of disparate treatment based on race in promotion decisions. Richard Kraft tried to maintain his composure. Statistics can be misleading without proper context. Robert cut him off by placing the email chain on the table. The silence in the room was deafening as they read their own words, their own documented conspiracy to deny promotions based on race. David Harrison actually went gray as he read his email about the diversity problem. Jennifer Walsh stared at her written admission that my race was a factor in their decision-making. I believe this provides the proper context, Robert said mildly. Patricia Thompson looked like she might be sick. These emails, they're taken out of context. They don't represent our actual decision-making process. Really? Robert placed a recording device on the table. Because we also have this. He pressed play and Jennifer Walsh's voice filled the room. We need to be careful about promoting too many minorities too quickly. It changes the culture and makes some of our key clients uncomfortable. It was a recording of a management meeting from 3 months earlier captured by someone with access to their internal discussions. Richard Kraft was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how much this was going to cost them in settlements, legal fees, and reputation damage. "What do you want?" Patricia Thompson asked quietly. Robert Johnson smiled. "Let's start with immediate promotion of Miss Green to Senior Director of Strategic Accounts with full back pay from when she should have been promoted 2 years ago. We'll also need comprehensive policy changes, sensitivity training for all management staff, and an independent review of all promotion decisions made in the past 5 years." And I added, speaking for the first time since entering the room, public acknowledgement that the company failed to provide equal opportunities based on race, along with a commitment to do better. David Harrison looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Jennifer Walsh couldn't meet my eyes. Patricia Thompson was calculating whether fighting this would cost more than settling. "We'll need time to consider," Richard Kraft began. "You have until Monday," Robert interrupted. "After that, this all becomes public record in federal court and I start calling journalists." The meeting ended with them scrambling to contact their insurance company and corporate headquarters. I walked out of that conference room feeling something I hadn't felt in 2 years: power. That weekend, Simon, Vanessa, Jerome, and I met at my house to celebrate. We grilled burgers in my backyard, played music that reminded us of home, and talked about what this victory would mean for other Black employees facing similar battles. "You did it for all of us," Vanessa said, raising her glass of sweet tea. "Every time they try to pull this garbage with someone else, they're going to remember what happened when they messed with Brianna Green." Monday morning came with a call from Robert Johnson. "They've agreed to everything," he said. "Full promotion, back pay of $47,000, policy changes, training, and a public statement. They're also establishing a $2 million fund for diversity and inclusion initiatives, and they're bringing in an outside firm to audit their promotion practices." The settlement was more than I had dared to hope for. But the real victory came when I walked into Meridian that Monday morning as Senior Director of Strategic Accounts with a new office, a 40% raise, and the respect I had earned but been denied. Jennifer Walsh couldn't look me in the eye during our first meeting. David Harrison was suddenly very interested in hearing my strategic recommendations. Patricia Thompson, who had been so dismissive of my concerns, now asked for my input on improving company culture. The power dynamic had completely shifted, and everyone knew it. 6 months later, the changes at Meridian were undeniable. 3 more Black employees had been promoted to leadership positions. The company's diversity training program was being used as a model by other firms, and most importantly, young Black professionals were applying to work there, knowing they would have real opportunities for advancement. But the impact went far beyond one company. The case made headlines in industry publications, and other firms began proactively reviewing their own promotion practices to avoid similar lawsuits. I started getting calls from Black professionals at other companies asking for advice on documenting discrimination and fighting back against systemic racism. I established a mentorship network connecting experienced Black professionals with those facing workplace discrimination. We created resources for recognizing bias, building cases, and supporting each other through the legal process. What started as my personal fight became a movement for change across the industry. My grandmother was right when she said they couldn't take what was in my head. But more than that, they couldn't take away my determination to use what I learned to help others. Every young Black professional who gets promoted because companies are now afraid to discriminate openly is part of this victory. The year since my settlement has been transformative, not just for me but for everyone watching. I've used my platform to speak at conferences about workplace discrimination, sharing strategies for documentation and legal action. The mentorship network I established now includes over 200 professionals across 15 cities, creating a support system that didn't exist when I was fighting this battle alone. At Meridian, the changes continue to evolve. We've promoted 4 more Black employees to leadership roles, and our client base has expanded to include companies specifically seeking diverse marketing perspectives. The Henderson Electronics account I was removed from, they specifically requested me back after hearing about the case, wanting to work with a company that actually lived their diversity values. But perhaps the most meaningful change is in the day-to-day culture. Simon was finally promoted to IT director with a 35% raise and a team of 6 reporting to him. Vanessa became assistant controller and is leading the implementation of new financial systems. Jerome was promoted to operations supervisor and is training other Black employees for advancement. The 4 of us still meet regularly, but now it's to celebrate successes rather than strategize survival. Our informal network has become a formal mentorship program, pairing experienced Black employees with new hires to ensure no one else has to navigate these challenges alone. You changed everything, Jerome told me during our quarterly networking dinner, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after us. My nephew is starting his marketing career next month, and he's applying to companies without fear because he knows there are people like you who won't let them get away with discrimination. That's the real victory, not just my promotion or settlement, but the knowledge that the next generation of Black professionals will face fewer barriers because some of us were willing to fight. I think about my grandmother often these days, especially when young people ask me for advice. She passed away last month at 84, but not before seeing the fruits of the seeds she planted in that Detroit kitchen all those years ago. You did it, baby girl, she whispered during our last conversation. You didn't just survive, you thrived, and you brought others with you. The legal victory was satisfying. The financial compensation was meaningful, but the lasting change is what makes this fight worthwhile. Every time a Black professional gets promoted based on merit rather than having to file a lawsuit, every time a company thinks twice before discriminating because they remember what happened to Meridian, every time a young person enters the workforce with confidence because they know their rights, that's when we really win. To everyone watching who has experienced workplace discrimination, document everything, know your rights, and never let them convince you that racism is in your head. The system won't change itself, but when we organize, when we fight back strategically, when we refuse to accept that's just how things are, we can create the change our children deserve. Your experiences matter, your voice matters, and your fight matters. Whether you're in Detroit or Los Angeles, Chicago or Atlanta, if you're facing discrimination, you're not alone. We've built a network of support, legal resources, and strategic guidance because nobody should have to fight these battles in isolation. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments. Let's build a community where we celebrate our victories, support each other through challenges, and continue the work of creating workplaces where excellence is recognized regardless of color. Together, we're not just fighting for promotions, we're fighting for a future where talent and hard work are the only qualifications that matter. The struggle continues, but so does our strength, and that's how we change the world. One victory at a time, one voice at a time, one generation at a time.